farting and causing methane and all that kind of stuff. It's all the vegetables that you have to grow, like the soybeans and the corn and whatnot, to feed to the cows, which is not the food that cows would normally eat, in order to cause them to become obese, so that, you know, more meat and more profit. Not to mention the antibiotics they give them and the giant waste pools, because the old-fashioned cow patties are gone because we feed them bacteria, so their guts are constantly in a state of turmoil. And so, you know, what's coming out is rather different. I'm not going to gross you out. And so anyhow, this Epicurious, so that's it. This the headline, Why Epicurious Left Beef Behind. The subhead, cutting out just a single ingredient, beef, can have an outsized impact on making a person's cooking more environmentally friendly. Today, Epicurious announces that we've done just that, and we're inviting you to join us. And then they've got, you know, the Planet on the Plate, talking about, you know, why they did this, and then all kinds of more resources on sustainable cooking. How do I ease into meatless eating? A great article. What does sustainable cooking even mean? Is there such a thing as sustainable beef? 86 delicious reasons to plan a plant-based picnic or cookout. 76 best vegetarian grilling recipes of all time. I think I'm going to spend more time on this website. So anyhow, we'll be back with your thoughts on all of this and more right after
You're
this.
listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're still also waiting to see video of Andrew Brown Jr. being assassinated apparently assassinated by the police. This is getting messy too. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work by Robert H. Frank. And I'm reading from the prologue. That we are more closely connected to one another than most of us realize is an old idea. An important variation dates from 1929, when Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthy published a short story entitled Chains. Two of the story's main characters speculate that any two living people can be connected by a chain involving no more than 5 acquaintances. That some such chains exist is hardly surprising, since most of us can think of people in distant locations to whom we're connected through a small number of intermediaries. The man bites dog aspect of Karinthy's conjecture is that almost any two people, A and E, could be linked by a chain like A knows B, B knows C, C knows D, who knows E. One of the first systematic attempts to test this claim came in the 1960s with a series of experiments by the psychologist Stanley Milgram. In it, he sent packages containing a small booklet to 96 people chosen at random from the Omaha, Nebraska telephone directory. His cover letter asked them to try to forward the booklet to a specific residence of Boston, Massachusetts, through a chain of personal acquaintances. He told them the name and address of the Boston resident, that he worked as a stockbroker, and that the first person in their chain should be somebody they knew on a first-name basis. Milgram also advised them to choose someone they believed, presumably based on the target's location and occupation, could be socially closer to the target than they were themselves. Subsequent recipients in the chain were asked to forward the same instructions. Many of the Omaha recipients undoubtedly tossed Milgram's booklet in the trash, so it's remarkable that the Boston target received 18 of the 96 packages. The average number of links in the 18 chains was 5.9. But the now familiar expression 6 degrees of separation would not gain broad currency until many years later, when John Guare's play by that name premiered on Broadway in 1990. The concept became a meme in full when 4 Albright College students introduced 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon in 1994, a game designed to measure the professional proximity of an actor, living or dead, to the American film star Kevin Bacon. An actor has a Bacon number of 1, for example, if he or she appeared in the same film with Bacon. Someone who appeared in a film with another actor who appeared in a film with Bacon has a Bacon number of 2, and so on. The average Bacon number is 2.95 among actors who have one. In that group, even the actor most distant from Bacon, William Rufus Shafter, has a Bacon number of only 7. Shafter, a Union Army officer during the Civil War, appeared in 2 films in 1898. For academics who study social connectedness, the 6 degrees concept gained little traction until 1998. That's when the sociologist Duncan Watts and the mathematician Steve Straga published their landmark paper, Collective Dynamics of Small World Networks in Nature. In the years since then, this paper has provided the mathematical foundation for the analytical tools that social scientists have been using with such remarkable success to study how ideas and behaviors spread through populations like infectious diseases. It has already been cited by other scholars more than 38,000 times and is one of the few papers ever published to be among the most widely cited works in multiple disciplines. In his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins coined the term meme, which Webster now defines as an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. The meme is to cultural transmission, Dawkins argued, as the gene is to biological transmission. One of Charles Darwin's central insights was that natural selection favors genetic variations that enhance the individual organism's ability to survive and reproduce. Much of the time, the same variations also benefit larger groups, but often not. For example, an inclination to cheat when no one's looking might benefit individuals, but widespread cheating almost always makes matters worse for groups. It is the same with memes. The memes that propagate most successfully are often ones that benefit both individuals and groups. But here too, not always. As the legal scholar Jeffrey Stake has argued, ideas should not be treated as inert products, but as living things that sometimes exert some influence over their environment. Some of the ideas are more adept at surviving than others, and the ones that survive will not necessarily be good for humans. It is often hard to evaluate whether a specific behavior even qualifies as a meme, and if so, whether its consequences on balance are positive or negative. Yet sometimes the evidence is clear. We know, for example, that the strongest predictor of whether people will take up smoking is the proportion of their close friends who smoke. Smoking is thus clearly a meme. The negative health consequences of smoking are also conclusively documented, and most smokers themselves express regret over having started. By definition, then, smoking unambiguously qualifies as a socially destructive meme. On the other side of the ledger, we have compelling evidence that the adoption of photovoltaic solar panels is both socially contagious and almost uniformly positive in terms of environmental consequences. Accordingly, few would object to calling the practice a socially beneficial meme. Adam Smith, widely considered the father of economics, is often cited in defense of the claim that competitive markets produce the greatest good for the greatest number. The book is Under the Influence by Robert H. Frank. Everything good, Sean? We're working? We're working. Okay, all right, great. We had about 15 minutes ago, we had about a 20 or 30 second pause in our internet connection for some reason. I don't know what's going on, but we are working on it, as they say. In fact, within the next couple of weeks, hopefully we'll have an entire new system in place. So step by step, constant improvement. That's what we're working on here. So let's pick up your phone calls on, the topics of the day. Barbara in San Francisco. Hey, Barbara. Thanks for watching us on Facebook
there,
Live.
Tom.
What's
Good
up?
morning to you. Lovely
Hey.
reading. Thank you so much for sharing that passage.
Thank you.
I wanted to just, as a nature educator with kids, I feel I live in essence of that almost every day, and I feel so grateful. We're out in the woods, and we really just get to dive deep into so many of those kind of values that you shared to remember what life is about. So I had an 8-year-old son, and I wanted to circle back to what you were talking about with Child Protective Services. 8-year-old son, this was about 8 years ago now, who got fallen into the tech world, into the tech gaming world. Now, as a nature educator, you can imagine what that might have felt like. But it opened up this Pandora's box of a rabbit hole we're all falling into with our kids, especially right now with the tech just dominating education. And I ended up having to call police on my son about 20 times because of this violence that came out of him with, I'll call it addictive gaming, right?
Oh, my goodness.
It was so bad, so bad. I actually ended up having to give my son to my ex-husband in order to control him, which he was able to do a little bit better than me because I was just surrounded by technology in the community where I was living. And these are violent, violent games, right? Technology is not a green resource, you know, and with so much technology being doled out to kids today and everywhere, you know, it's something that we really have to look at on an environmental level. But what
So
I began
did you
to
have
see
a problem with Child and Protective Services? Is that the essence of
I
what you're
came close to losing my son. When the police came over and they saw my son, who was literally just addicted, it's like cocaine, especially at a certain age and for certain kids. My son certainly fell into that category. And there's a great book about it called Blow Kids by Nicholas Kadaris. We ended up butting up together and recognizing that this is a national crisis that's not being talked about. And I just so happened to be a lucky one to, you know, to discover it myself, sadly. But you know, it's something to really acknowledge today and how that's actually having an impact on our environment. I mean, technology, again, is not green, right?
Right, no, I get all that, Barbara, but what I'd like to know is, did Child Protective Services,
Yeah.
I'm suggesting that Tucker Carlson is trying to terrorize the most marginalized people in our society with Child and Protective Services. My experiences with them were very mixed, but that was 30, 40 years ago. Is this still kind of a black box where you can lose your rights, you can lose your kid, you have virtually no appeal?
I'm a white woman. I came from a pretty wealthy community back into this, you know, kind of poor apartment living, and I noticed a huge difference. They were looking at me. I mean, they came so close to taking my son. They were asking if he's drugged up. They were looking at me as the abuser. I mean, I had to walk on eggshells. I ended up trying to educate them about what was going on. But I also work in the foster kids, foster work today because of that, recognizing what is going on with our system that we're so willing to take children away from, you know, good parents, and without asking harder questions. And Tom, I mean, you know, with our system of 500,000 children in the foster care system, I have discovered that it is a horrific system that has huge money in it. And it's something that we could actually start to acknowledge and start looking through it. And my little work, I started to get trained last year because I really was curious to find out what's going on, you know, and with the big money in it too. There is some wisdom in really teasing it out.
Yeah, no, and there's some good parts to it. And Barbara, thank you for the call and for sharing your story. I mean, some of this is absolutely necessary. There are just some god-awful parents out there, and I could tell you just horror stories. But also, the system itself it does not have the checks and balances, let's say, that the adult child care system does. Lucille, or the adult criminal justice system does, excuse me. Lucille in Ventura, California. Hey, Lucille, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, so good to talk to you. Excuse me, I just swallowed a vitamin. You know, I was thinking, this is a question for you. Do you think that if the people called Child Protective Services to let them know how distressed we are over what Tucker Carlson is saying, I feel he is such a dangerous man. And do you think it would help in any way? Because, like you said, he is causing people to take masks off their children, and the children could possibly get ill. But and then he goes on. I mean, he's on every program now. People are just crazed about it. So you think it wouldn't make any difference?
I don't think that any of us should be calling Child Protective Services for anything other than a serious concern about a child that's at risk. And that's part of what's so horrible about what he's doing, is he's encouraging people to call a service that is already overwhelmed. You know, there's some really great people working in Child and Protective Services, and by and large, they tend to be handling 2 or 3 times the workload they should, because the funding is so poor. And then, you know, you get into the judges and all that kind of stuff, and how difficult things can be. But no, I would not call them. What I would do is, in all probability, is be either calling the advertisers for his program or just ranting about it on social media. And I realize, part of what he wants is for people to talk about this because he wants more publicity for himself. But, as we saw with Bill O'Reilly and with Glenn Beck, both of them, white nationalist racists who went over the edge on Fox News repeatedly, eventually they became so toxic that even Fox News had to say, okay, enough, see you guys later. And I am hopeful that if Tucker keeps going down this road, that something like that could happen. Lucille, thank you for the call. Renee in Burbank, California. Hey, Renee, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
I am well. What's up?
Back when my son, who's now 30, was about 8, we used to live right behind our elementary school. And he would walk home from school, and the babysitter got out of school at the exact same time at a local high school about 10 blocks away. So there was always a little bit of an overlap. And one day he got home from school, and there was a bee in the house. He called me at work, freaked out about the bee. And I told him it'll be okay, the babysitter will be there. But in the meantime, I picked up the phone and called a neighbor and asked him to go down, take care of the bee, and wait for my babysitter since he was kind of freaked out. A person I worked with overheard my conversation with my son, but not my conversation with my neighbor, and made the assumption that my son goes home and is alone every day. So about a week or so later, I get a phone call from my mother, who was at my house, and my roommate, not even my babysitter, telling me that Child Protective Services was at our house.
Oh, my God.
And, yeah. And I had to leave work, lose money, and go deal with this over a misunderstanding. But the thing with this Tucker Carlson saying this, he's going to have CPS making all these kind of, unnecessary calls like they did to me, and causing people possibly losing work. We're already having enough trouble with this, economy, people just getting back to work. And if they have to run home because, Child Protective Services is showing up because Tucker Carlson said call.
Well, and real children who are really getting abused. I mean, the first kid, when Louise and I started this community for abused kids up in New Hampshire, the New England Salem Children's Village, the first kid I did intake on was a kid who had been, along with his brother, tied to a pole in the basement by their father. His brother had died there. The smell alerted the neighbors. They called the police. The police came. This kid that ended up in our program was nearly dead. He was, there are some real genuine horror stories out there. And Child Protective Services, this is the kind of stuff that they should be focusing on. The second kid we did intake on was a girl who is the daughter of her sister by her father. I mean, it's that kind of stuff is going on out there.
We've had a couple of very.
Go ahead.
There's been a couple of cases out here. I don't know, out in Lancaster, here in California, where there was a couple of children who died, and Child Protective Services, they were being checked on, but they weren't doing a good job of it. And a lot of it was because the caseworkers were overloaded. And so these kids fall through the cracks, these kids that are being abused. And the last thing they need is more unnecessary, work piled on them. It's a thankless job, and they don't have enough help, and kids die.
And they don't have enough resources, and
No.
the court system is
overloaded.
Or at least, again, like I said, 30 years ago and 40 years ago when Louise and I worked in this field, the court system was whimsical, shall we say. Yes, there are laws, but so much is up to the discretion of the judge. And a lot of these, in New Hampshire, the judges were just local lawyers who did this part-time. And so you could get, 3 different judges with 3 completely different opinions. Renee, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Yeah, it's a tough one. This, thank you. What Carlson is doing is bad for kids, frightening for low-income people and minorities, a public health menace, and he's damaging Child Protective Services in a time when they need more resources.
Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. And welcome back. Diane in Hazel Creek, Illinois. Hey, Diane, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. It's Hazel Crest, but that's okay.
Oh, Hazel Crest. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have a question. Isn't Tucker Carlson in direct violation of FCC regulations because he's distorting the news on so many levels? He's intentionally trying to cause harm to certain groups with the rhetoric that he is spewing out.
Sadly, the answer is no for two reasons. Number one, cable television is not regulated by the Federal Communications Commission. It is not over the air, so it doesn't use our airwaves. So, you know, that's the number one, and that's why, you know, when Trump was using his S-hole countries word, they would just repeat the actual word on cable television. And in fact, I got rather tired of hearing it, but they couldn't do it on the network news, you know, on ABC, because that's going out over the air. So number one, they don't have that authority. But number two, even if they did have that authority, they no longer have that authority. You can argue that, you know, prior to '87, when you had the Fairness Doctrine in place, you know, Reagan stopped the enforcement of it in '87, and then Obama took it off the books, I think in 2009 or 10 or whatever the year was. But back when you had the Fairness Doctrine, you could at least make an argument to that effect. You could make a complaint to that effect. But again, it would have to be an over-the-air radio or television station rather than a cable system. So, which raises a whole nother question for a whole nother day, although it's one that keeps kind of creeping into these conversations that we have here on this program constantly, which is, you know, what are the boundaries?
Exactly.
What are the limits? At what point? I mean, you look at some of these so-called news networks like One American News or Newsmax. Well, I mean, I laid out 3 lies that Fox has told this week. You know, just flat out lies, and they knew they were lies. But these networks even go beyond that. I mean, this is like the National Enquirer, except everybody knew that the National Enquirer, you know, man found with space aliens, head stitched to his head, you know, head transplant. We all knew that was parody, right, or a joke, or weird, or, you know, and there were, you know, even farther out ones than the National Enquirer. Nobody thinks that, or at least the people who watch Fox News don't think that Fox News is parody, and therein lies the problem.
There are a lot of people that didn't think what Trump said about drinking bleach and Lysol was parody, and they did it. So, you know,
oh yeah, and people died from it.
I know. And that's the scary thing that is going on with Fox News. Thank you, Tom, very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane. Yeah, thanks. You know, it's a good question. And you know, it's like, why isn't there some? There is some marginal regulation of cable television. Cable operators have to pay into a fund that funds C-SPAN, and they have to provide community access. But those don't have to do with content, and they're not. And that's not the Federal Communications Commission. I'm not sure which federal agency it is that oversees that, but it's not the FCC, or if it is, it's certainly not the FCC, as it has to do with content. You know, which leads us to this question: how can a democracy survive when its trusted news sources, in quotes, don't actually tell the news and can't be trusted? We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stick around. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So for our Thom Hartmann Insider videotape that is over, or videotape, YouTube, whatever you want to call it, private video that's available over at ThomHartmann.com, I'm talking this week about Donald Trump just completely giving in to Erdogan of Turkey, the president of Turkey, the dictator of Turkey now. And this theory that Jared Kushner okayed the killing, at least the capture, perhaps the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and to Mohammed bin Salman, and that Erdogan has the tape of it, and that when he called up Donald Trump a couple weeks ago and said, I want you to pull out of Syria and give me those Kurds so I can kill them and take that land, that he did it because Erdogan threatened him. And then Erdogan comes to the United States, a week or two later and gets a whole state dinner thing. Check it all out. It's over at thomhartmann.com. I think you'll find it fascinating. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Whitney in Kaplan, Louisiana. Do I have that right, Whitney?
You sure do.
Hi.
I wanted to
What's up?
tell you that I have a friend who's in CPS. It's called something here different, but it is Child Protective Services. Now, they consider this, or at least she does, and some other people I know consider this thing with Carlson laughable. And I will tell you, we may rank 50 in a lot of things as far as being a crappy place to live, but our Child Protective Services is very well run. They make immediate responses within 2 days to any kind of report that is valid. In other words, they're not making, they're not involving themselves in this fiasco. And they make regular visits to the families that have the foster children. You have to go through a long training process here to be a foster parent. And the special needs children are very, very well taken care of. So
good.
We do have
I'm glad
a
to hear
wonderful system here, and I'm glad that certain people, anyway, that I know, think this is all absolutely ridiculous. But we do have a lot of very ignorant people who buy everything that Fox News says. So it's sad,
Yeah, it really is. And I'm hopeful that Child Protective Services are not being overwhelmed or even harassed, basically, by these Carlson followers who are calling them on these people. I mean, this is just terrible. It's just terrible. Whitney, thanks for the report from Louisiana. Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you. Thanks so much for the report. Ruth in West Los Angeles. Hey, Ruth, what's up?
Hi, how are you? Wonderful show. I have two comments on two different subjects that have been raised today. Number one, on the subject of video games. I'm come from a family who's comfortable, and so I realize that I'm blessed. My brother and his family were quote unquote Katrina refugees. They got sent to Houston and had to go to new schools and didn't know anybody anyway. To assuage the kids, my brother brought them a video screen for video games. The first Christmas, my nephew asked me for Assassin's Creed. The next Christmas, he asked me for Hitman. And he just graduated, he just graduated from Columbia Law School, Law Review, Kent Scholar. I wanted to get him a nice, briefcase for his first job. He wanted a Nintendo Switch. So yes, they are. They are addictive, and I'm a loving aunt. So what did I do? I bought it, but I'm nuts. I need to be taken to Child Protective. But anyway,
and some kids can handle that, and others can't. But back to Child Protective Services.
Right. I mean, he obviously didn't play it, so much that he couldn't, graduate from law school on Law Review and Kent Scholar. But the point is, he is still addicted to it. The other thing is about Child Protective Services. Yes, they do the best they can with very limited resources, but they also make mistakes. And I lived through one where my fiance's son was living with us. He was 15, not 16. At the time, he wanted to stay with us because he was having abuse by his mother. And since it was a custody battle and he couldn't stay where he wanted to, but he was out here, the bottom line is his mother filed kidnapping charges. CPS appeared at our door, took him away, then found that he put him in a place where, you know, it's now been closed down in Los Angeles. It was so bad. Brought him back because they realized he wasn't being abused, and then put him in a foster home for 2.5 months while we waited for the court date. So I'm just saying they have limited resources, but if they take kids away and put them in foster homes, if these people have to wait for trial dates, it will damage children. So that's my point.
Extraordinarily. I mean, you know, being separated from your parents is one of the most radical and severe things that can happen to a child. And you know, it's just and to have a national television personality encouraging people to try to provoke the beginning of that kind of a process is just it's beyond the pale, Ruth. It's
Thank you for your wonderful program. There's such important issues, and
you can finish your thought.
Oh, and important issues, and you have a wonderful audience, and you're wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. That's very kind of you. And thank you very much for the call. We'll be back. We're going to get into a bit of a debate here, or at least a discussion, probably a debate with Charles Sauer about the capital gains tax. Joe Biden wants to raise it. He'll be talking about that tonight. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
Today we're reading from Behold America by Sarah Churchwell, The Entangled History of America First and the American Dream. This is from the prologue. On Monday, 30 May 1927, a cool day with showers forecast, New Yorkers were gathering for the annual Memorial Day parades around the city. It was only 9 years since the end of the European War, into which America had been so reluctantly drawn, and Europe had suddenly become closer than ever before. Precisely 10 days earlier, Charles Lindbergh had completed the first solo flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and no one had yet stopped celebrating. Front pages around the country reported that Lucky Lindy had been mobbed in London, greeted by rapturous crowds of 150,000. Few Americans were talking about much else than the newest national hero, but in New York that day, different kinds of mobs were about to gather. Around 8 a.m., a group of Italian immigrants living in the Bronx set out for the elevated train on their way to Manhattan to join the parade. But they were not going to honor the American soldiers who had died in the service of their country. They were supporters of Mussolini, planning to join 400 American fascists who were marching in Manhattan's Memorial Day parade as part of the official fascist movement in the United States. They had been invited by the parade's organizers, to the outrage of many anti-fascists, including Italian nationalists and anarchists who threatened violence if the invitation wasn't rescinded. It wasn't. Like all his fellow fascists intending to march that day, Joseph Carisi was wearing the black shirt uniform, sporting leather boots, jodhpurs, a black cap, and carrying a steel-tipped riding crop. When he stopped to buy a newspaper, Carisi was jumped by two men, stabbed in the neck, and left to die on the sidewalk. Another fascist, Nicholas Amoroso, who was running either to catch up with his group or away from the killers, reports vary, was shot 4 times, once right through the heart. One of the 2 murdered men had served in the American Army during the Great War, the other with the Italian Army, papers reported. The parade they had meant to join took place without them, a fascist delegation of several hundred that was guarded by police to, quote, avert disorder. After the parade, the American blackshirts returned to their headquarters in the heart of Times Square. There, another of the fascists standing outside was set upon by 3 men. He defended himself with his riding crop as his fellow blackshirts charged out brandishing clubs and whips, chasing the assailant through the theater traffic in Times Square, who fled as the black-shirted mob tore through the traffic. 100 fascists, reported the New York Times, rushed the attackers. A melee ensued that was quickly dispersed by the police. There was also violence in Brooklyn, where a parade of fascisti marched from the Angelo Rizza Fascista League at 274 Troutman Street in Bushwick. The LA Times reported several hundred men were parading, including 40 or 50 in the black shirt uniform. Fights broke out between supporters and protesters mingling on the sidewalks, and an anti-fascist was found lying on the ground, stabbed in the back. He survived and identified a fascist as his assailant. Accompanied by 30 police reserves to forestall violence, the marchers made their way through Brooklyn, stopping at the Wilson Avenue station, where the fascisti came to attention and gave the fascist salute. They ended at a Roman Catholic church, where the priest blessed them under large American and Italian flags, while the police remained on guard. The biggest outbreak of violence that Memorial Day, however, occurred in Queens, where it centered around a different right-wing group, not Italian Americans, but the self-proclaimed 100% American kind. By 1927, the Ku Klux Klan had spread across the United States since its rebirth in Georgia 12 years earlier. The first Klan was formed in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, as former Confederate soldiers in Tennessee created a secret society to promote white supremacism, and terrorize the newly freed slaves in the South during the Reconstruction era. The name is generally believed to have originated from the Greek word for circle, kuklos, while Klan pays homage to the mystified Celtic heritage supposedly shared by white Southerners. Within a decade or two, the first Klan had been successfully suppressed by law enforcement and died out by the turn of the century. But in 1915, it was resuscitated in Georgia, and by the early 1920s, the second Klan had achieved a powerful political presence in the United States, not only in the South, but across the country. I would add this is because of 1915, the movie Birth of a Nation came out. The Klan had an active presence in New York City and Long Island by 1927, with favorite slogans, which they even attempted to copyright at various points. That year, the Klan was quote, calling attention to the fact that it first announced the program of 100% Americanism and of America First. They were not, in fact, the first to adopt these mottos, as this book will show. In 1927, both phrases had been around for a decade or more. But as far as the Klan busily copywriting hate was concerned, America First belonged to them. And on Memorial Day in Queens, 1,000 or so of them had gathered to march, many in white robes and hoods. They were accompanied by 400 women from the so-called Clavana, the feminine branch of the Klan. Some of the reported 20,000 spectators in Queens that day objected to the Klan's presence, as others defended their right to march. Scuffles broke out, and it turned into a riot. Women fought women, and spectators fought the policemen and the Klansmen as their desire dictated, said a newspaper. Klan banners were shredded, and 5 of their number were arrested, said initial reports, while a few others were caught up in the confusion as well. The book, Behold America, Sarah Churchwell. There's Charles Sauer, the libertarian economist and the president of the Market Institute. MarketInstitute.org is the website. Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R, is his Twitter handle. And Charles, welcome back to the program. Joe Biden is proposing, in part to pay for his infrastructure program, to raise the capital gains tax at the very least up to where the ordinary income tax is, and perhaps even above that. My question to you is, why should somebody who makes their living sitting on their butt around the pool waiting for the dividend checks to arrive, why should the Paris Hiltons of the world pay a lower income tax rate on the money that they make with their money than I make, or presumably you make, with the sweat of our brow?
Well, because we want them to invest their money. And in fact, even at the rate it is, it's still a disincentive from investing their money. We want them to make their money work. Even you want companies to make their money work. You want them investing in research and development. You want them doing more things with money and putting it back into the economy instead of just sitting by the pool and drinking their margaritas. So having any sort of capital gains tax rate is a disincentive to invest, because that money's already been taxed. It's been taxed at the corporate level. It was taxed as income when the people got it, and now you're going to tax it yet again. The effective tax rate on capital gains is currently sitting at around 40%.
No, it's not.
Absolutely.
If you get no, it's not. It's you know,
if you get paid $100 from a company, if you get paid $100 from a company from a capital gains, you are then taxed on that. Let's take that down to $80 because I believe that. Well, let's take it down to $80. But to pay you that $100, the company had to make almost $130. So your effective tax rate is about 40%.
No. If I'm making my living by investing, and by the way, as you well know, Charles, probably 95% of all capital gains in the United States are not actually investments in the sense that you're talking about. If I buy $100,000 worth of stock in ExxonMobil doesn't see a penny of that. I'm buying that stock from somebody else who's selling it. I'm just speculating in the marketplace. And that's easily, with the exception of an IPO, 100% of all stock purchases and the vast majority of capital gains are the result of people playing in this lottery system, essentially, and they're gambling in the stock markets. And so, if somebody, if the wealthy heir of the Walton fortune is sitting around saying, sitting around the pool, on their butt, waiting for the dividend check to arrive. You're saying that we should give them as much money as possible so they'll invest it. Number one, history doesn't show that that's what happens. They put it in offshore accounts. They use it to buy mega yachts. They use it, they use it to buy another mansion in France. And number two, the most productive investments are where small business people start companies in the United States. These are not people who are living on their investments. These are not people who are, paying capital gains taxes. But basically, the bottom line is there's two ways to make money. You can either make money with money. That is, you can make money by, quote, investing. And like I said, most investments aren't actually investments. They're playing the market. Or you can make money by working. And ever since, Reagan, to his credit, actually, he came out once and he gave a speech, and maybe you remember this, that I think this was 86. He said, should a bus driver pay more in taxes than a person who invests for a living? And everybody said, no. He was talking to a bunch of kids, and he said, you're right. No, they shouldn't. They should be the same. And he got the capital gains tax and the ordinary income tax both set at the same level, 25%, for 1 year. And then, of course, the ordinary income tax had to come back up because it was wiping out our economy or our federal budget deficit. But the capital gains tax has been much lower than that basically ever since then. And so, again, you can say some wonderful thing is going to happen if we give rich people more money. But, I'm not buying that, Charles. I am not hearing any kind of an argument, a real argument, for why, when wealthy people make their money gambling in the marketplace, that they should not pay at least the same income tax rate that I pay for the work that I do on this program every day.
Oh, man, I can tell you what. Here's what we agree on. We agree that the government is going to spend money, and we agree that there's taxes that the government needs to take in order to spend that money. But we need to do that in the most efficient and effective way possible. And the capital gains rate is a disincentive to invest. As you said, if the rate goes up, people will just move their money to offshore accounts. They will hide their money. So you've proven that that's a disincentive. And so that is not a good thing. But we might disagree on how much money the government's going to spend, but we should be able to agree that we need an effective tax code. And the capital gains tax is this double tax, if not a triple tax. And that's where you have the real problem, because that is an inefficient tax method, and it does disincentivize people from investing. We also disagree, on when
this
I get
is not a double tax,
because I've invested in Apple, that's coming from the company. That's not coming from random taxpayers. So you are actually buying a part of the company. That is, as the stock goes up,
well, you're buying stock
happy.
in the company.
It's a real investment.
Yes, and you're getting the dividend, but the company is not getting your money. Apple, if you buy $1 million worth of Apple stock tomorrow morning, Charles, how much money of that $1 million has Apple seen? Zero. You bought that stock from somebody else who decided to sell $1 million.
A portion of it in the fact that their market share goes up, their market value goes up, the stock that they are holding goes up. Look, I know that.
The price of stocks go up and down based on supply and demand.
You don't want to address the fact that it's a 40% marginal tax rate.
And that, which it is not, but nonetheless, all I'm arguing, Charles, just a very simple argument, is that somebody who makes their living sitting around the pool waiting for the dividend check to arrive should pay the same income tax rate that you and I do.
If we had an efficient tax code, we could have that, but we don't have an efficient tax code. So you've already.
So wait a minute, are you agreeing with me?
Corporate tax rate. No, I don't agree with you because I want them to invest their money. I'm okay with the person sitting by the pool paying the same tax rate. But you need to
how
tax
is
the
it
money
any
correctly,
different
because
if Paris Hilton makes $1 million sitting around the pool on her family's investments in dividends, or if Paris Hilton makes $1 million because she starred in a TV show this year, which is actual labor, she can invest, to use your phrase, either of those $1 million, however she wants, whenever she wants, under any circumstances she wants. But again, back to the question of, shouldn't the tax be the same? Why is it that we as a society have decided, really since the 50s in a big way, that, although largely since the 80s, that we are going to give, quote, investors, wealthy people whose money makes money for them, a better tax rate than workers, people whose bodies and minds make money for them? I don't understand the rationale for
Paris
that.
Hilton. So Paris Hilton earns $1 million. Paris Hilton earns $1 million. She pays taxes on that $1 million, and now she invests that money. You want to tax her again? I'll tell you what, Tom. Why don't we tax people every time they walk outside their door with cash in their pocket?
That's additional income.
Because
that's additional income, Charles.
Tax the same money. You can only tax the dollar.
I'm not talking about taxing the $1 million. I'm talking about taxing the profits she makes from it. That's not double taxation.
She's already paid the tax on the $1 million. That's why you have to ignore the first part to make the argument.
All right, I'll leave you with the last word. Charles Sauer, the marketinstitute.org is the website. Charles Sauer, S-A-U-E-R on Twitter. Charles, thank you for dropping by.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Yeah, good talking with you, Charles. Thank you again. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour. And welcome back. And Rob in Mount Iron, Minnesota. Hey, Rob, what's on your mind today? Rob, watching Free Speech TV in Mount Iron, Minnesota? All right, I'm going to put Rob on hold just in case here. He's on line 4, Joyce. Let's try Roger in Indianapolis. Hey, Roger, what's on your mind today?
Hello, Brother Tom. I've got a comment about a question I'd like to ask Tucker Carlson, and I have an answer that anybody who wants to use it is free to use. I'd like to ask Tucker Carlson and all his ilk if they believe in liberty and justice for all. And, of course, you know they're going to say yes. The follow-up would be, then you take care of yours and don't tread on mine. And that's basically all I have to say.
What does that mean? What, Roger, I don't understand. What does that mean?
That means that with Tucker Carlson encouraging people to turn in people who have chosen to wear a mask, they are treading on their liberty to do what they think is necessary to keep their family safe.
Oh, I see. So what you're suggesting is that when Tucker Carlson encourages people to turn the parents and kids who are wearing masks into the police or child protective services, he is, in effect, taking away their liberty. Is that what you're saying?
Basically, yes, because I've seen these flags and it says, don't tread on me. Well, it seems like they get great enjoyment by going with people that don't have their worldview and treading all over theirs.
Yeah, good point, Roger. Yeah, they're hypocrites. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Roger, thank you. Thank you very much. Rob in Mount Iron, Minnesota. Let's try it again. Rob, what's up?
I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
I can this time. No problem. What's up?
Okay, it's where, I don't know. It's where you probably already heard about this, but what do they call the president or the premier of Australia?
He's the prime minister, if that's who there is a president also, which is a ceremonial position, but the prime minister is the big cheese.
Okay, he was on the air a little while back, and he was on, he basically put down Rupert and Fox News every 6 ways to Sunday. He even talked about his son Lachlan, that is even more right-wing than Rupert. And
yeah, I think you're talking about Kevin Rudd. The current prime minister, Scott Morrison, is a conservative and is afraid of Rupert Murdoch. He doesn't often take him on. I mean, maybe I missed something. But Kevin Rudd, who was the last actual kind of progressive prime minister of Australia, that was like 10, 15 years ago, Kevin Rudd has written several pieces. The most recent was just a few weeks ago. Probably the most famous was about 2 years ago in the Sydney Morning Herald, which is kind of their New York Times. It was titled Rupert Murdoch, the Cancer at the Heart of Australian Democracy. And so Kevin Rudd, the former prime minister, has been just like all over this thing. And yeah.
I could be wrong, but it's where, again, for Lachlan to be able to take and leave the United States because Donald Trump lost the election. He made so much sense in everything he said. It's where Fox News has not got very high priority in Australia.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's like Canada kicked him out, and the UK to some extent, although they do own a bunch of newspapers in the UK, including the Times of London. Anyhow, back with more of the news of the day in just a minute. It's coming up on 20 minutes past the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So David Perry over at Medium.com put together a list of 38 reasons to investigate the Trump administration. Everything from the Russian influence over the 2016 election to the Trump family's collusion with Russia to Ivanka Trump's trademarks to federal spending at Trump properties to the civilians killed by Trump's drone strikes to the Trump administration's role in turning the United States into the global epicenter for the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, we are. Yes, it's grim. Their decision to sideline the CDC, politicizing mask wearing just to try to get himself reelected, the number of people who died because the White House kept PPE from blue states, from Democratic-led states, the contents of the Trump documents that Trump refused to release to the House Judiciary Committee and other committees, all the people who wouldn't speak, at all, ignoring subpoenas, violations of the Hatch Act, the deportation of COVID-positive immigrant families, illegal altering of records. Anyhow, there's a whole list. It's over at thomhartmann.com. Check it out. And welcome back. A couple of other things that I just wanted to put on the table, and then we can continue our conversation about, what's Tucker's end game? I mean, is this actually an attempt to go after the least of among us, shall we say, the least powerful, the least willing, or the least capable of defending themselves, hiring a lawyer to go into child and family court and things like that? Or is this just a stunt, to try and get his ratings out? What's going on with this? But there's a couple of other things happening in the news that I think are really worth mentioning. Paul Krugman, the progressive economist who writes for the New York Times and does a great job. Paul is, he and I have had a few small disagreements. We were on the Air America cruise back in 2006 or 7, and we had a debate on that cruise about so-called free trade. But other than that, I think, probably 99% of the stuff, economic stuff that Paul Krugman is promoting, I would, salute. And he's pointing out that the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, and some of these other right-wing groups, most of them funded by the Koch network and other cranky right-wing billionaires, have been working now for 7 years to rewrite our Constitution. Not to amend it, not to write new laws, but to actually open the Constitution up through what's called an Article 5 convention. Article 5 of the Constitution says if you can get 3/4 of the states to say yes to this, you can hold a convention and you can rewrite the Constitution. It's never been done. But they are very close to this. And they've been holding dress rehearsals in D.C. now every year since 2014. Convention of States dot something. I think it's it might be org, but Convention of States, if you want to see, what they're up to. But it's really, they don't say, oh, we're doing this to make life better for billionaires. We're doing this to write into the Constitution the things that the Supreme Court has done that we like, gutting union rights, or making it so that rich people don't have to pay as many taxes, or establishing corporate personhood once and forever, or saying that, when corporations and billionaires give enormous amounts of money to political candidates or political parties, that's actually speech, don't you know? It's not bribery. They want to actually embed this stuff in the Constitution so that if liberals ever get on the Supreme Court, they can't do anything about it. And this year, lawmakers proposed 42 Convention of States resolutions in at least 24 new states. And the concern is that if the Republicans and Fox News and these right-wing commentators who are trying to tell everybody don't wear masks, don't get vaccinated, this is what they're saying, if they can keep this virus going, if they can keep enough people freaked out about the virus that they're afraid to go to work, they're afraid to go to the store, they're concerned about going to a restaurant, even if they're vaccinated, because now we've got variants that you can get even after you're vaccinated. If they can keep this virus going, if they can prevent America from achieving herd immunity, then they can prevent Joe Biden from getting the virus under control, which means they can prevent President Biden from getting the economy back on its feet. And we all know what happens when the economy's in the crapper. The party in power loses the next election, which is coming up in a year and a half, in 2022. And if they can seize enough power in a couple more states, they can have their convention and they can rewrite the Constitution. And this is real. And this is something that they have been working on for decades. In my opinion, these are people who do not believe in what you and I would call democracy. They do not believe in a republic. This could, if they have their way, they don't believe in the social safety net. They think that Social Security and Medicare are unconstitutional. They are socialism. They think that people should be allowed to discriminate in 16 ways to Sunday based on their religious beliefs. You would see the First Amendment with your right to petition, to gather together, to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievance. That's under attack right now. In over 40 states, Republicans have introduced laws to basically criminalize protest. And in a half a dozen states now, probably soon to be a dozen states, they've introduced laws that would have made Heather Heyer's killer walk as scot-free as Trayvon Martin's killer did. The stand your law version, only instead of with a gun, you're going to stand your ground. Instead of standing your ground with a gun, you get to stand your ground with a 2,000-pound piece of machinery or a 4,000-pound piece of machinery, a car, wrapped in steel. I was so terrified I had to run those people over. Right, that's what's happening. Meanwhile, I've got to tell you what the French are doing. This will be our crazy alert. I'll share it with you on the other side of this break, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. So stick around. We'll be right back right after this short break here at the bottom of the hour. And within 6-8 minutes, I'll be picking up your phone calls, and we will continue that for the rest of the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of the news, what the French are up to, and your calls right after this. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until, at last, we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits, in that secret, a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest health care program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single-payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy, and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of health care. I believe this health care is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are health care. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer health care is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust. I'm telling you, remember back in 2009? This is a big story back in 2009. We covered it on this program. There were a bunch of employees at this factory in France who got laid off, and they rigged up a bomb with propane cylinders at the factory. And they threatened to set off that bomb, which would have destroyed millions of dollars worth of equipment and products, if they didn't get better severance pay for having been laid off. The factory was shutting down. They seized their executives, the senior executives, and they held them hostage for 30 hours. And during that time, they negotiated with those executives for 120,000 euro, about $140,000 a year, increase in their severance pay. That was in 2009. Now, then in 2014, this happened in eastern France. This was a Swedish-owned Electrolux vacuum manufacturer. They put a row of wooden pallets leading up to a 6,000-liter tank of propane, again, a bomb, And when talks broke down, labor talks broke down, they lit the first pallet on fire. They lit the fuse. So this pallet catches on fire, that catches the next pallet on fire, that catches the next pallet on fire, that catches the propane tank on fire, and the whole factory blows up, right? Only it didn't get that far. Management said, okay, we give. By the time the fire went to the second pallet, they gave in, and the workers got what they wanted. Well, they're at it again in France. This week, workers at a Renault car parts factory in northwestern France, this is from Agence France Presse, filed today, held 7 managers against their will for 12 hours on Tuesday in an attempt to prevent the plant from being sold. They call this boss napping. Like, is it kidnapping, boss napping? This is at the Fonderie de Brentage foundry near the town of Lorient that had been put up for sale by Renault. And the managers were released around 10:30 last night, 10:30 p.m. The car manufacturer strongly condemned the detention. The union guys said they still didn't want to have a dialogue, so it was pointless trying to talk to them and hanging on to them. So they kind of gave up. They're still, the union representative, Mr. Le Goff, says, we're still waiting for progress with this issue. It's been going on for a year. It's exhausting. Amazing, amazing stuff. So anyhow, a lot of stuff we've been talking about, and let's just get into some of it here. Margie in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. Hey, Margie, what's on your mind?
The thing that frustrates me the most when people argue that there should be no capital gains tax is that they are lying through their teeth. They never mention the fact that the original investment or the nut is not taxed. So if you invest $100,000, you're not taxed until the 101st dollar. Therefore, there is no double taxation. Then they
and you're only taxed on that first dollar.
Correct. And then they also want to eliminate the estate tax. Well, a lot of that is capital gains. Well, you earn all this money through capital gains. You don't pay tax on it. You die. Your children inherit the money. They don't pay taxes on it. That money is never taxed. They're telling
in many cases
the exact opposite of reality. I mean, it's just a furtherance of Kellyanne Conway's alternative facts, and it needs to be called out as it is. It is a lie.
I am with you, Margie. It is. Or at the very least, an urban legend. Thank you. You said it very well. Christine in Ashland, Oregon, you had some questions about the capital gains tax?
Yes, Tom, thank you. My question, well, I'd like to give you a little scenario. My father worked really hard, made some money in the stock market, or invested money in the stock market, and then made some money in the stock market. When he passed, I had to pay out of that money, which isn't that much really. I had to pay the inheritance tax. He was taxed when he made that money. When he worked and made that money, he was taxed, and I paid inheritance tax. And if I have like a little house, it's 1,000 square feet. If I had not gotten the inheritance, I would be homeless on the street. Because of his generosity and intelligence, I can now work in my garden and have my little house, and I'm also disabled. So without
all of that is wonderful, Christine. If he left you less than $15 million, you paid no inheritance tax on it at all, number one. And number two, the profits that he made on his on the appreciation of his stock, he did not pay any capital gains tax on that at all until the time that he liquidated that stock. So if you inherited that stock, then there might have been a capital gains tax, at that point in time. But there's ways around that. There's a lot of ways around that. So what you may be thinking of as an inheritance tax might have been the capital gains tax on that. But it really boils down to this. If you take $1,000 and you use that money to buy a nice suit and pay for the trip to an employer's office to get a new job, and so you're investing $1,000 in getting a new job, and they hire you, and you work there for a year, and you make $10,000 that year. You pay income taxes on that $10,000. Normal income tax, 10,000 isn't that much. It'd probably be, a small percentage, but nonetheless, you pay an income tax on that. If you take that same $1,000 and instead of buying a suit and investing in a trip to potential employers, you take that $1,000 and you buy Apple stock, and a year later that Apple stock has gone up in price so much that you've got $10,000 now from your $1,000 investment. You also made $10,000, but you pay half as much in taxes because you made your money with money rather than making your money by showing up at work every day. It seems to me that if you show up at work every day, you should pay a lower tax rate than the guy who's sitting around on his butt next to the pool waiting for the dividend check to arrive. What am I missing here?
Tom, I agree with 99.9% of the things you say on your show. And this I'm just a little confused with. I'm just, so if you don't make a heck of a lot, you're not going to have to pay capital gains, because I'm going to have to pay capital gains this year on not much. I mean,
you'll pay very little. The capital gains tax is a progressive tax, just like regular taxation. If you just make a few $1,000s, you're not going to pay any tax at all, or it's going to be so minimal, it'll be inconsequential. Capital gains taxes, serious capital gains taxes don't kick in until you're making tens or hundreds of thousands. I'm sorry, I don't have the tax tables in front of me, and I don't make, I don't think I've ever paid a capital gains tax. If I have, it's been fairly small. But, capital gains tax, just like regular tax, the only difference is that, they're both progressive. In other words, as you make more money, the rates go up. You pay less on the first dollar than you do on the last dollar, that sort of thing. The difference is that if you pay income tax because you work for a living, you pay a higher tax rate than you do if you invest for a living. And this is because people who invest for a living have piles of money, and they bought a bunch of legislators, and they got our tax code written this way. And in my opinion, it's just a scam. There's no other way to say it. Christine, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Dave in Federal Way, Washington. Hey, Dave, what's up? We have about a minute and 20 seconds.
Okay, hey, Tom, I just want to tell you, look, I learned this, all right? So don't misunderstand me. I just came to this conclusion. Look, Republicans, conservatives have one big problem. They terrorize themselves, okay? Now, this concept of woke capitalism, I was really shocked at the terror I was seeing. They are really afraid of this woke capitalism boogeyman that they created, because I don't think it's real. And it was like their firewall. Now, that, and combine it with Tucker Carlson, which I got a lot of anecdotal evidence, him and Bill O'Reilly, people that knew them in the past say they are totally out of character when they're on TV, right? What they're doing, or what Tucker Carlson is doing, is he doesn't understand how dangerous it is. He is looking for...
I think he fully understands it.
Well, he's looking for the line of fiction. He knows that his consumers prefer fiction, all right? And he's looking for that line because he doesn't want peered out by, like, Janine Pirro, for instance. Like, he doesn't want to talk about ETs and aliens. Joe Biden is an alien. But he wants to see how far he can push the line of craziness, because that's what conservatives prefer.
It's not craziness he's pushing right now, Dave. It's white supremacy, and that is toxic. That is dangerous, deadly stuff. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of Americans have died because of the doctrine of white supremacy, and they continue to die every day because of the doctrine of white supremacy, and that's what he's pushing. But, I get what you're saying. Thank you very much for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
I believe it's the FBI is, federal investigators. They just raided Rudy Giuliani's apartment and made off with his electronics. This is going to get interesting. And welcome back. Jessica in Chicago. Hey, Jessica, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's up?
Hi, Tom. To the last caller, Dave, it's not craziness. It's endangerment of children. And you're 100% right. Tucker Carlson is endangering children's lives. My neighbors are the children are half Indian and half Korean. So the children's skin is actually a darker tone. They are the most respectful children I've ever met. The mom was walking with the little girl, and when the little girl saw me in the garden, she immediately put her mask on and ran up to me. But she stopped 6 feet away to talk to me about her walk. And when I was talking to Joyce, she said, these kids already have a target on their back, and she's right. And Tucker Carlson doesn't need to bully all these children.
Yeah. Well, he's really bullying their parents. I mean, it's a terrifying thing, the possibility that your children could be taken away from you. And it's... Or just that you'd be...
children.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is brutality. This is just brutal. He's promoting brutality for ratings.
It's endangerment. It makes me sad.
Yeah, I'm with you. I couldn't have said it better, and I completely agree. And I think the question is then, what do we do about that? How do we respond to it?
He should have been fired.
Well, apparently the Murdoch clan is just, they're doubling down on this stuff. I mean, their newspapers promote this kind of stuff. The New York Post, which is owned by the Murdochs also, they published that story about how Kamala Harris's books are being given away to immigrants. And the woman who wrote it said, I was forced to write that story and I quit. I mean, journalistic integrity survives, but apparently it doesn't survive over at Fox News. And so it's one that we're going to have to do something about this. I don't know what, whether it's, waking people. I mean, when Glenn Beck went off the rails and started, freaking out about the Tides Foundation, and this crazy guy showed up with a whole bunch of weapons and put like over 100 bullets in state police cars as he was trying to get to the Tides Foundation to murder everybody at their board meeting. At that point, Fox News started realizing, hey, we may have some liability here, and they basically got rid of Glenn Beck. When Bill O'Reilly was charged with fourth, fifth, whatever it was, a loofah sexual harassment charge, they realized they've got some liability here. I don't know if there's a direct liability in association with this.
For the children, I believe there is.
Yeah, but I mean, what's it going to take? Is it going to take, like with the Tides Foundation, with Glenn Beck? Is it going to take some guy with a semi-automatic weapon and hundreds of rounds of ammunition shooting up a half a dozen California Highway Patrol cars? I mean, what's it going to take for Fox News to say, okay, enough, next?
He should have to
Jessica,
go back on his word on what he said.
Yeah, I agree. He should be apologizing. He absolutely should be apologizing. Jessica, thank you for the call. It's coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We'll be back in 1 minute. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Ask a boomer what it was like going to college back in the 60s and 70s and whether they had to go into debt to do it. And odds are they'll tell you that they not only didn't have to go into debt, in fact, college was free in California until Ronald Reagan became governor. Not only did they not have to go into debt, but you could pretty much work your way through college just with a part-time job. That is very much no longer the case. Only 8% of millennials and Gen Xers have never had a student loan. This is a crushing burden on these two generations, and it's time to clean it up. And when Americans were asked, what do you think? Should we just wipe the slate clean? Should we get rid of all this student debt? 60% of Americans said yes. And then, of course, the corollary to that would be, and then let's make college free, at least state colleges and community colleges. There's a whole video about this over at thomhartmann.com for supporters of our program. You can check it out there. And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And boy, what a day and so much news, huh? Rose in Chicago. Hey, Rose, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I just wanted to point out that it is not just the communities of color that are at risk because of these reckless comments from people like Tucker Carlson, but the undocumented community, I would think, is at risk as well. Because is a young Hispanic mother going to risk walking with her young child to the store to buy a gallon of milk if it could lead to an encounter with police regarding mask wearing, and then they find out she's undocumented and possibly gets deported? I wonder perhaps if this is also part of the Republicans' endgame as well, putting these undocumented that do come out of the shadows at risk of not just losing custody.
I think that's entirely possible, Rose. Yeah, and I mentioned that in the article, and I mentioned it in my riff, but it was just a single sentence. It just kind of, I said, and if you're undocumented, your danger is 100 times greater. And for exactly the reasons that you so well articulated, this is it's just mind-boggling that this is, I realize I use that phrase way too much, but this is just so wrong. Rose, thank you for the call. Marcia in La Jolla, California. Hey, Marcia, what's up?
Hi, yeah, Tom. I wanted to circle back to Epicurious and not doing meat recipes. So
right.
I'm a cellist, and my bow is made out of Pernambuco, which almost doesn't exist anymore in the world. It was grown on the coast of Brazil, and the Portuguese
it's a hardwood, isn't it?
Harvest. Pardon?
It's a tropical hardwood, isn't it?
Yes, it's very strong and flexible. And they found that nothing really comes close to it. Bow makers have been buying statues and carving them up for bows because they're worth more as bows. But they took down a lot of the rainforest in order to graze cattle for Burger King, and that's where the Pernambuco was growing, and so bow makers couldn't find it anymore. And now they're growing seedlings, and they plan to plant them along with cacao bushes because cacao bushes love Pernambuco shade. And so instead of eating beef at Burger King, you can eat chocolate from Brazil.
Right. There you go.
So yeah, it was because of grazing beef that they took down the Pernambuco forest and the rainforest there. So I just wanted to put in my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you. That's fascinating and another great data point. I really appreciate it. Greg in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, Tom, I wanted to call you about capital gains, but I see you dropping the white supremacists. You were guilty of it last week when a black caller tried to disagree with you regarding police stops, and you tried to dress them down. So I guess that in default makes you a white supremacist. Are you a white supremacist?
I don't know what you're talking about, Greg. Did you want to have a serious conversation, or you want to just? Okay, I'm going to move along here. Will in Salem.
Hey, Tom.
Not going to litigate. So, hey, Will, what's up in Salem, Oregon? I'm Will. What's
Tom.
up?
Hi, Tom. Can you hear me? There's a delay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wanted to call
very
about
slow.
the capital gains too. That the discussion you had with Sauer. I think that we need to start using a new terminology for inheritance babies. The Paris Hilton analogy is awesome, but I think we need to start calling them what they are, which is welfare recipients. They're collecting and living off welfare from mommy and daddy their entire lives. That's what it is, and I think that people need to understand that we need to tax welfare at least at the same level as we tax people who work for a living. And not number one. Number two, it's the more serious comment, but I meant that actually, is that we have to tax these inheritance families, because without that, they are a severe danger to democracy. And that the bottom line is, that's the end of the story. They cannot accumulate mass wealth. They are a direct and serious threat to any democracy.
Well, this is what I was talking about yesterday. We had one family, it was Shelley Adelson and his wife, who donated $191 million, if my memory serves me correctly, in dark money to politicians, to Republicans who had supported and voted not to have Joe Biden as president, to overturn the result of the last election. And that was just the largest of them. But there was, another guy who inherited a pile of money from daddy. He kicked in $50 million. I mean, our democracy is being distorted by this vast wealth. And an awful lot of these rich people are making a lot of their money now through capital gains. Because, hey, how much money can you make off the sweat of your brow? But you invest money, and giant piles of money come back at you. I wouldn't call. I'm concerned about using the word welfare, though, because go ahead. I'm sorry, Will.
No, I understand the slur of welfare, of course. I mean, trust me, yeah. I hate that term, and I know it's a horrible, ugly term. But trust me, I understand it. But the point is that sometimes I think you need to fight these ugly, street gutter fighters with their own weapons.
We used to call them trust fund babies.
Back in their face, if they're gonna continue using terminology like that, then okay. Then how about the welfare that you're getting, Tucker, from the welfare that you got from mommy and daddy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and he was born into a wealthy family, but I have no idea how much or what it means. But he's a multi-millionaire, I can tell you that. Will, thank you for the call. It is incredible. Coming up in the next hour here in the third hour of the Thom Hartmann program, we're going to get into our science revolution with Tish Odell.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartmann. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!
In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people. These men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Tish Odell is on the line with us. Excuse me, a CELDF, Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, CELDF, Ohio organizer and OHCRN board member. OhioCRN.org is that website, CELDF.org the other. Madion, M-A-D-I-O-N, Mom is Tish's Twitter handle. Tish, welcome to the program. Tell us about this most recent, well, actually, let's begin at the beginning. The rights of nature. This battle in Ohio goes back a number of years. You want to give us some background here?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, this case goes back, probably to about 2015, 2013, 14. I don't know. It's so long anymore. But, yeah, communities in Ohio, and starting in my community of Broadview Heights where I live, we were the first ones to pass a community bill of rights that included rights of nature language. And what we saw were the first few years, they let them go on the ballot, meaning the state, and people voted on them and they passed overwhelmingly. And then what we started seeing, the system didn't like these going on the ballot, and so they started keeping them off ballots. And that's actually the basis of the case. We had an appeal in federal court last week. Beiersdorfer versus LaRose is the case. And, it's all about people's right to practice and assert democratic rights to propose laws themselves and vote on those.
So it's not that the Ohio legislature or the Ohio powers that be are saying, we think that what you're proposing here by including language that gives nature certain rights, they're not saying we think this is wrong or we think this is unconstitutional. They're saying we don't think you should have the power, the right to put this before the people of the state of Ohio for a vote. Do I have that correct?
Well, it's actually, in their local communities or counties where they're keeping them off the ballot. And you hit it right on the head because it's really about power. So, and it's interesting, the American Petroleum Institute, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, the Oil and Gas Association, they've all filed amicus briefs. And in their briefs, they have said that the local laws people are trying to put on the ballot are illegal and unconstitutional because it violates their corporate constitutional rights. So, yeah, and the courts have basically, what the legislature's done underhandedly, sneakily, they've inserted language into other bills to give local boards of elections and county boards of elections the ability to look at the content of these laws the people are proposing. Maybe it's stopping fracking in the community or a pipeline or an injection well and saying, no, you can't put that on the ballot. You can't let the people vote on that.
So let's define some terms here. What specifically do you mean when you say the rights of nature, and why is this important?
That's a big question. So what the people have found, and I think this is all over the country, not just in Ohio, that their representative government is basically paid and controlled by corporate entities. And they have the legislatures in their back pocket, and they just write laws and hand them over to the legislatures to pass. And so communities find themselves in a place where they just have to accept these environmental harms to their local environment and nature in their communities. And there's no way to stop it. There's no way to protect themselves. And so they've decided, corporations have all these rights. Nature should also have rights. And we're going to propose this local law that puts this in place. And we want to give the people in the community a voice to decide. And then, so this is where obviously the controversy is. And they don't want this to go on ballots. And a lot of it, because the cases we have had passed and have gone to court, the courts obviously have held up the corporate constitutional rights. But they don't like, I think, that we're exposing the system and how this all works. And that's really the big, thing here. We have to stop these from even going on a ballot, because the ballot, then you get to a campaign, and a campaign is all about public discussion. So let's just suppress that. We don't want any of that going on.
So correct me if I'm misunderstanding or misinterpreting, but let's say that you are successful in establishing that nature can have rights, and you establish through law or as a consequence of that law, administrative action, that a particular stream in Ohio has its own right to survive, and some hog farmer wants to move in down the road and dump all kinds of waste into it, or they want to build a mine down the road, and you're trying to prevent that from happening because, hey, that stream has a right, it has its own right, it's part of nature, it has a right. Who is there, like a guardian ad litem, like with kids in court? I mean, is there a community? I mean, who speaks for nature, and what's the process?
Right, and that's a good point, a good question, and something that we're all figuring out. And the way it's been written in the Ohio laws is that any resident within the community can be the voice for nature in the environment. We're working with some other communities now where, they might be appointing some kind of ecosystem advocate. This is part of when you're in a movement and you're trying to make this kind of change, and it's never happened before. It's evolving as it goes along. But the way the Ohio laws are all written is that any resident or the municipality could actually speak if they chose to, but in most cases they don't choose to. But any resident could bring that forward.
So it's sort of like you're building the airplane while it's flying here, or while you're trying to get it flying. This situation with Ohio, we've talked with various CELDEF folks a couple of times, I believe with you too, Tish, in the past, as it had to do with Lake Erie and things like that. Have other states preemptively banned rights of nature? Is this now a thing? Is this the next thing we can expect from the Koch network and ALEC and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, they've already passed it in Florida. So what was interesting in Florida is the Democratic Party came out saying, oh yeah, in public, like, we're in favor of rights of nature. At the same time, there was bills within the legislature, the state legislature, preempting rights of nature, and they were all passed unanimously. So all the Democrats who on the outside, telling the public, oh, we're for protecting nature and rights of nature, were actually then voting to preempt rights of nature.
Wow. Wow. Is there any place where this has been successful, inside or outside the United States, where we can point to this and say, okay, here's how it works, here's how it worked, here's the process, this is replicable?
Yeah, in Ecuador, there's been some cases, the Vilcabamba River, because, those passed, they added that rights of nature to their constitution in 2008, so now we're just seeing the first court cases. And what's interesting about this is that actually in that case, what happened is the river won. I mean, the judge actually ruled that in favor of the river. We don't know how all the cases would turn out, right? But so that's the whole point of these rights of nature laws, is to at least then, that's supposed to be the court's role, is to interpret laws. So we know there may be controversies between parties, but what they're doing here in Ohio and in Florida and places where they're trying, in Oregon, they've had problems with keeping things off the ballot, and who gets to determine what goes on, is they're putting blockages in that step so that you can't even get the law passed, so that then you can get before the judge.
Tish, we just have 10 seconds. Has the United Nations or any other international body taken a position on this?
No. We thank you for your publicity, because we have a hard time getting it.
Yeah. Well, we need more of it. We need more publicity. We need more organizations working on it. CELDF, CELDF, as in Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund.org is the website, and OhioCRN.org, the two websites. Tish O'Dell with the CELDF Ohio organizer and OHCRN board member. Thanks, Tish.
Thanks, Tom.
This is the Thom
Great to have you
Hartmann
with us.
Program.
We'll be back 15 minutes past the hour, so we can get back into Tucker Carlson. Oh, my God. Or capital gains tax, for that matter. And welcome back. Katya in Lancaster, California. Katya?
Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I know what to do. Okay. Thank you.
You are on the air.
I'm sorry.
Apparently, Katya doesn't realize that Katya is on the air. So we will, Joyce, you can drop in on line one and say hi to her. Marianne Faithfull. Remember Marianne Faithfull? Oh, my God. I'm dating she's 74. I'll be 70 in May. So she fears she may never sing again. She got COVID. And as a result of COVID, she was cutting an album. And her album is now her reading poetry, her favorite poetry, Byron, Shelley, Keats, and other 19th century romantics, over background music from some of her favorites, all-star cast, Warren Ellis, Nick Cave, Brian Eno. But this is just one nasty disease, this COVID thing. It's just one nasty disease. Katya, let's try it again in Lancaster. You're on the air.
I'm sorry. I was
okay.
picking my dog up from getting neutered. I wanted to ask if I call up Fox News and ask them for every one of Tucker Carlson's sponsors, would they give me the phone numbers to them so I could call them up and tell them that I'm boycotting every single product of theirs until they get rid of that piece of garbage?
I can guarantee you they will not, but they're and I'm kind of ambivalent about advertiser boycotts as a program that's sponsored, that's supported by advertisers myself. But that said, MediaMatters.org, the organization is called Media Matters for America. They led the last anti-Fox boycott with some success, I think. And they would have that information. I don't know if you'll find it easily on their website, or you'll have to drop a note to somebody there. It's been a week or two since I've been over at MediaMatters.org, but they're the principal let's hold Fox to account organization out there, and they're doing a very, very good job of it, or at least they used to do a spectacular job. I know they've had a real apparently a big major cut in their staff. But that's where I'd start, Katya. I don't think calling Fox is going to do you any good. In fact, you might even get sneered at. Or
tell them if I just call them up and tell them that I will no longer watch their show, which I can't because I'm afraid my head will explode.
I get, we get those kind of calls and emails and things, you said so-and-so and I'm never going to watch your show again, or I'm never going to listen to it again. I mean, that after a while in this business, in the media business, you just kind of get used to that. It's like, that's the price of being on the air. And the majority of people who, what you learn is that the majority of people who say, I'm now offended and I'll never listen again, either A, we're never listening to begin with, in which case, so what? Or B, it's typically an empty threat. They will listen again. They will come back. There are some people who go away, but it's such a small percentage that you can't program out of fear. And I can tell you that's not just me speaking. I mean, this is just right across the board. This is the industry. But you can program out of fear of losing sponsors. So, it is something to check out MediaMatters.org. I think you'll find what you're looking for there. Katya, thank you very much for the call. It's great to hear from you. We'll be right back. It's 20 minutes past the hour. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So the Republican Party has sold themselves way back, all the way back to the 60s, really, as the serious party. We're the party of issues. We take stuff seriously. We have serious policy analysis. We have serious constitutional analysis. We are serious about the economy. We have all these think tanks, Heritage and Competitive Enterprise and Cato, and we've got the Federalist Society finding serious judges that we can put on the federal bench, and in response to 4 dead Americans, they got real serious. 5 House committees, 2 Senate committees. They created a separate House Select Committee for 4 dead Americans. That was Benghazi. Thousands of hours of testimony. The Secretary of State testifying for 8 hours straight. But when 5 people die at the Capitol, not so much. Got a new video about it over at ThomHartmann.com. Welcome back. So much to talk about, so little time. 21 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, the place where despair is not an option. Todd in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Hey, Todd, what's on your mind today?
I'm a little confused. Okay. You had that caller talking about, or you had mentioned earlier about the new laws going into effect, or maybe going into effect, that where you can run over a protester with your car. My question is if that goes into effect into states that have your stand your ground laws, say Florida, where I'm holding a gun and I'm in a protest and someone starts running people over and I shoot the driver, you're both in the right. Which law wins?
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, that's just the stupidity of the Republicans. It's like, you're both in the right now.
Yeah, that's the logical extension of the old NRA. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. In other words, or an armed society is a polite society. If everybody simply has the ability to inflict instant death on everybody else, then we'll all be just wonderful people. And
shoot each other.
I think yeah, exactly. I think you have exposed the absurdity of it, Todd. That's definitely a good one. Thanks very much for the call. That 5 stars there. Sean in Cincinnati, Ohio. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind today?
Well, the guy your previous caller, I saw this. I explained this capital gains, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but are they not taxing them on what they're making? So that's a gain. It's just like if I make money off of something, I have to pay the taxes. I will pay my, what is it? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, and that was the example I used of, buying a suit and a car. I mean, the reality is that there are expenses that we all have that are associated with having a job and going to work. We have to buy new clothes from time to time and wash them and we've got to drive our car to work. And none of those are deductible expenses, by the way, for the average working person. So when we work, we earn an income and we pay an income tax on that. Now, if we have some money left over, let's say we got $1,000 left over, and we use that money to buy Apple stock, and just to pick a company, and Apple pays a dividend this year, and so I get a $100 dividend. How is that $100 dividend, which is income to me? I don't pay taxes on that $1,000 worth of Apple stock. That was my initial investment. I only pay income tax on the $100 profit that I made, the dividend. So, or if I sell the Apple stock for $100 more, I pay, on the increased value. So I'm only making money on the money, I'm only paying taxes on the money I made. Just like if I go to work, I only pay taxes on the money I made. So it is not double taxation. It is income in both cases, which is why it's referred to as capital gains income or ordinary income. In other words, work with your mind or your body income. And my question for Charles and for anybody else who wants to defend the capital gains tax being half of what the ordinary income tax is why is it that people who make their money investing money, which seems to me like a lot less work than building bridges or roads or or being a gardener or a landscaper or doing a talk show seems like it's a hell of a lot less work. Why do they pay half the income tax rate that those of us who work for a living pay?
I'd like to know that myself. I worked my entire life to a point where I was doing steam work and ended up the same. So,
yeah,
I'm still paying taxes on all this. I mean, this just aggravates the living daylights out of me that these people use. They use these terms to try to fool the easily fooled. I guess I don't know what you want to say, but it just the aggravation.
Yeah, and if you're getting Social Security disability, Sean, or if you're getting unemployment, you are paying income tax on that now because Ronald Reagan changed the rules. It used to be we didn't pay income taxes on Social Security. It used to be that the average person could deduct interest payments that they made. Like if my company pays interest, on a credit card or on anything else, my company can deduct that from its taxes. That's a taxable expense, tax deductible expense. And prior to Reagan, you could deduct not just the interest on your home mortgage, which is still deductible, but you could also deduct the interest on any of your loans, student loans, car loans, credit card loans. Reagan did away with all of that. And then he said, and by the way, if you're an average middle class person and you're getting income from Social Security or from Social Security disability or from unemployment, we're going to tax all that as if it was income. But if you make your living, like Paris Hilton sitting around the pool on her butt waiting for the dividend checks to arrive, if that's how you make your living, you pay half as much as the person who's living on Social Security, for God's sake. So, Sean, I'm with you. Sean, I got to run, but thank you. You really you summarized it perfectly. You put it in the perfect nutshell. I'm still waiting for somebody to call and say, no, wait a minute, Tom, you got it wrong. There's a good reason to have capital gains taxes at a lower rate. And I'm not buying that, gee, if they have extra money, they'll invest it argument. I'm just not buying it.
Listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Because it has never been demonstrated to be true. We'll be back.
Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by Alan J. Lichtman, and it's titled Repeal the Second Amendment, The Case for a Safer America. This is from the introduction, titled A Book That Must Be Written. On April 28, 1996, 28-year-old Martin Bryant stopped at an inn near his home of Newtown in Tasmania, Australia, and shot to death its two owners. He then drove to the former penal colony and tourist attraction of Port Arthur, where he lunched at a cafe. After eating, Bryant pulled from his sports bag a semi-automatic rifle with a 30-round magazine that he had legally purchased through a newspaper ad. With no provocation, he began firing at patrons in the cafe and its gift shop. Before the police stopped his shooting spree, Bryant had murdered 35 and wounded 18 others. His motive remains unknown. There were people everywhere, bodies, said witness Lynn Beavis. I thought at the time, being a nurse, I've seen dead people, I've seen blood, I've seen things like this, but what I saw in there, nobody but perhaps a soldier would know what that was like. The leadership of a shocked nation responded to the Port Arthur massacre, not with thoughts and prayers, but with decisive action. The country's conservative-led government rebuffed their gun lobby and its American ally, the NRA, to adopt comprehensive national gun controls. In a 2015 broadside labeled Australia, There Will Be Blood, the NRA charged that those regulations, which Australia significantly tightened as of 2002, have, quote, robbed Australians of their right to self-defense and empowered criminals. If the NRA was right, America, with its lax control over firearms for alleged self-defense, should be one of the world's safest countries, certainly far safer than Australia, where criminals presumably evade gun controls to prey on defenseless, law-abiding citizens. Yet in the latest reporting year, gun homicides claimed 14,542 American lives, compared to 27 in Australia. And all homicides took 19,510 American lives, compared to 222 in Australia. Since the NRA issued its warning, firearm homicides have declined in Australia, while soaring by 3,534 in the U.S. An American is now over 30 times more likely per capita than an Australian to be murdered by a gun, and 7 times more likely to be murdered by any means. If we had rates comparable today to Australia's, some 14,000 American lives would have been saved from firearm homicides in 2017 alone. By the gun lobby's twisted logic, Japan, which has one of the world's strictest gun control laws, should be drenched in innocent blood. Yet out of a population of 127 million, shooters in Japan murdered only 3 persons and injured only 5 in firearm assaults throughout 2017. Australia and Japan are not outliers. As compared to residents of our closest peer democracies in the G7 group of nations plus Australia, an American in 2017 was over 20 times more likely to die from a gun homicide. The gun lobby would have you forget that gun deaths are not limited to murders. In 2017, 23,854 Americans died from gun suicides, 64% more than were killed in firearm homicides. As compared to the peer nations, the 2017 per capita rate of firearm suicides in the United States was 7 times higher, while the rate of suicides by other means was 40% lower. These other democracies all have strict firearm regulations. None has a constitutional right to keep or bear arms, a distinction the United States shares worldwide only with Guatemala, whose gun murder rate is the 3rd highest of some 195 nations worldwide. Why has America lagged behind the democratic world in protecting its citizens from needless death and injury? The culprit is not spending by the NRA on campaigns and lobbying, which other pressure groups exceeded. The real problem is that which gun control advocates fear to name, the Second Amendment. Led by the NRA, the gun lobby exploits a historically defective, perverse reinvention of this amendment to inspire their grassroots supporters, sell guns, and provide constitutional cover for their opposition to making us safer by regulating firearms. The competing movement for gun control has floundered in response to the gun lobby's triumphant marketing of the Second Amendment. Gun control advocates have righteous zeal and noble motives, but lack a winning strategy. Instead of forthrightly refuting the lobby's bogus claims, the gun control movement has instead fallen into the trap of lamely insisting, "Oh, we support the Second Amendment, but we also support responsible gun control." With such a self-defeating strategy, the movement can never win. It plays on the gun lobby's home turf and fails to rally the American majority that favors stricter firearms regulations. It provokes only scorn from a gun lobby that dismisses yes but assurances as rank hypocrisy, and it ignores the clear history and the true meaning of the Second Amendment itself. The movement for gun control must strike hard with a new strategy. Repeal of the Second Amendment is not only right, but realistic. It would break open the political logjam and open a path for the comprehensive national gun control and safety measures that have eluded the American people for so long. None of these measures would confiscate firearms or stop Americans from using guns for hunting, sport shooting, antique collecting, or legitimate self-defense. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These form the Second Amendment. Book Repeal the Second Amendment by Alan J. Lichtman.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Steve Eckert tweeted at me, and again, just because somebody said it on Twitter doesn't make it true, but these numbers look to me, as I mentioned earlier, it's been a couple of years since I pulled out the capital gains tables and had a really in-depth conversation with anybody about capital gains, but I believe these, if they're not accurate, they're close to accurate. Steve tweeted, capital gains tax rates for married couples are 0 on the first $80,800. So, you know, if you've got money in the stock market and you're watching it grow and you want to cash that in, 0 tax on the first 80,000 bucks, 15% from 80,801 to $501,600, 15%, and 20% above $500,000. And that's not on the value of the stock, that's on the profit that you made. In other words, the income. So again, don't take those don't take those numbers to the bank, and don't try to use them to do your taxes. But I do believe that we are in that neighborhood, and that's what this is all about. So and the whole double taxation thing. I mean, come on, give me a break. Rick in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I was just thinking, well, if a person saves his money up, and he goes out and he buys a truck, and he invests in a truck, well, then every penny he makes off that truck, why should he have to pay taxes?
Because he's making pennies off the truck. That's your business.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, under the capital gains and stuff, they're under the impression.
Oh, I see.
That they should pay taxes.
Right. If he made $80,000 on his truck, he would have to pay income tax on that $80,000, which would probably be in the high 20s. If Steve's numbers are right from Twitter here, if he made $80,000 on investing in Apple stock, and I don't mean to pick on Apple, it's just I'm looking at an Apple computer here in front of me. Then he would have to pay nothing, because capital gains taxes don't.
Yeah, but I invested my money into this dump truck, so now, and I pay taxes on the money that I invested in this dump truck. So it's like, well, then why?
Isn't that double taxation?
Dump truck is going to make work instead of money making money. My dump truck is making money, so why should I pay taxes? I mean, that's what they're saying on their money. Why should they pay taxes? Well, my money's working for me too. It's just in a different form. I mean, why should I pay taxes anymore? Because now I drive a dump truck, and hey, I invested it in my dump truck, and it's doing me very well. And why should I pay you taxes? I mean,
no, I absolutely get the argument, and it's like this radio show. I mean, Louise and I, the first 4 years or so of this radio show, we not only made no money, but it cost us money. I mean, we took our retirement money and we put it into building this show. And, the same thing the first couple of years that we were on Free Speech TV, we had to invest substantially in video infrastructure. We paid for that ourselves, and for the first couple of years made absolutely nothing for that. That was our money that we had earned in the past, that we had saved. And yet any money that we made as a consequence of that we took as income, we paid income tax on, not capital gains on. Same thing. I get it. Well said. Thank you very much, Rick. Doug in Portland. Hey, Doug, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Two things. One is I do make some money on capital gains, and I'm happy to pay more. I think it sounds reasonable and fair, and the inequity in our country is so egregious.
I think we just should set the capital gains tax as the ordinary income tax and not even have it as a category. Income is income. You pay taxes on income, period.
That sounds reasonable to me. There was also something that came up a few years ago, if you remember, what was it called? Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street. And that generated a lot of buzz. And there was something that circulated back then about a tiny sliver of a tax on stock trades, which you also addressed, I believe, last week with one of your guests. I don't know what that's called, but it sounds like it would be very effective and good for our country and the world. I forget what it's called and what you think about it.
It's called the Securities Transaction Excise Tax, STET. It's referred to as the STET tax. It was put into place in 1934 or 35 when Franklin Roosevelt, maybe it was even 33, when Franklin Roosevelt created the Securities and Exchange Commission to oversee the stock market so that there wouldn't be another crash like there was in '29. He hired, famously making the joke, it takes a crook to catch a crook, he hired Joe Kennedy to be the first director of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Jack's dad, and he put a tax of, as I recall, it was 0.1% on each transaction. It might have been a little more than that. It might have been like 0.2%, but it was a very small tax on every transaction that was, on any stock market, and the money from that securities transaction excise tax, the money from that tax on those transactions was to pay for the cost of the Securities Exchange Commission. In other words, to pay for the infrastructure of making sure that the system didn't crash again. By the 1960s, that STET tax, I think it was 63, I might be off by a year or so, but it was in the early 60s, that STET tax was making hundreds of millions of dollars more than the SEC was costing to run. And so somebody came along and said, hey, let's just do away with this tax. We don't need it anymore. The SEC is not that big. They don't cost that much money. They're a tiny little bip in the national budget. We'll just pay for it out of general revenue, and we'll do away with this STET tax. When they did away with that STET tax in the 60s, the two things that we saw happen as a consequence of that were, number one, the stock market started steadily increasing at a rate that we literally had not seen in the history of the United States. And in part, that was because trading became so much easier. There was, that STET tax was like gear, sand in the gears. It slightly slowed down things. So if somebody wanted to just churn, buy 1 million shares of stock today and make, a hundredth of a penny on each share at the end of the day, sell them all the next morning, buy them, make another hundredth of a penny, on another 1 million shares. If there was a STET tax, that kind of churn activity, and today we call it program trading, that would have become unprofitable. But once they got rid of the STET tax, that became very profitable, and we have seen this program trading, this churn kind of trading, this trading that doesn't have anything to do with the value of the company. It doesn't have anything to do with the underlying value of the company. It has nothing to do with the marketplace. It is simply basically gaming the system. We have seen that now kind of take over as the principal model on Wall Street, and it's one of the reasons why Wall Street has exploded so much since the 1960s. I mean, keep in mind, the stock market in the 60s was like, the Dow was like 800 or something like that. I mean, we're talking 34,000 now, right? And so that happened.
All that.
Well, hang on just a second. And the other thing that happened when they got rid of the STET tax was that market instability increased. The swings became much more extreme because there was so much more of this program trading. And so the argument that Elizabeth Warren is making is bring back the STET tax. She's got a fancy new name for it, and I'm sorry I don't have that right at the tip of my tongue. But bring back that securities transaction exchange tax and put a little bit of sand in the gears. It will stabilize the stock market. It may not grow quite as fast, but it'll grow more steadily, and you will not see the kinds of explosions and recessions that we have been experiencing since the 1960s. Sorry, Doug, back to you.
Well, I just think it sounds great, and I don't have your depth of knowledge and experience or Elizabeth Warren's, but in some way it just seems sensible to me to put that sand back in those gears and slow down the whole process.
Yeah, it's just and hey, let's use that money to let the SEC actually do some antitrust enforcement, which the SEC used to do and pretty much stopped doing, kind of in the mid-50s, early 60s, totally stopped doing in the 80s because Reagan just basically told them to stop doing it. But the SEC used to look at those kinds of things too. Doug, thank you for the call. Michael in Memphis, Tennessee. Hey, Michael, what's up?
Hey, Tom, a couple things. The first thing I wanted to piggyback on the previous caller. He had a question about the law that Florida passed where you can literally run into people protesting. Give you a scenario. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I'm of a certain race that gets killed all the time by cops, and I'll leave it there. So my question is this. What happens when I decide to run my vehicle? Let's say they're having a MAGA rally or Proud Boys or Oath Keepers rally, and I decide to run my car in one of those. Is laws going to be on my side?
Somehow I doubt it, Michael.
Here's another one. Here's another one. The idiot governor here just passed a law basically making Tennessee the Wild West, where you can have, you don't have to have a license to carry your weapon. But I had this conversation with people at work. Well, it's a good idea. I said, of course it's a good idea, until black people kill white people. Then you're going to go back and you're going to change the laws again. Because
when California got their laws? California got their gun laws after Bobby Seale and Huey Newton walked up the steps of the California state legislature past Ronald Reagan, who was talking to a group of high school students carrying guns. And within a week, you had gun control in California. So, Michael, I'm sorry we're out of time, but I am with you. I am totally with you. Yeah, we'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Talk media for the rest of us, for the sane among us. Back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Don in Pleasant Hills, California. Hey, Don, thanks for listening on the Thom Hartmann app. What's up?
Well, I'm one of those investors. I have been since the 90s. What I had learned when I was very young is that the way you retire comfortably is a three-legged stool strategy of stocks, Social Security, and pension. Of course, most people don't have the pension, and Social Security is questionable. I was lucky enough. I've been investing, so I'm looking forward to. I'm getting those benefits, but up until recently, shall we say, this is what was taught. If you want to retire comfortably, have a nice little nest egg there of retirement. I have no problem with taxing that as income and not as a deduction. But you are perhaps generalizing a little bit much, because there's a good sized population that depend on those retirement dividends in order to fund themselves once they get older. And
right, but it is a progressive tax, and so if somebody is older and they're living off dividends, odds are they're not paying any capital gains at all on those dividends. If they're low enough
Not
income,
true.
if they're just living on Social Security. All right.
If you have the dividends when you in an IRA, when you pull them out, you will be charged.
Oh yeah, of course. And dividends are and dividends are not considered capital gains. It's a different category of income. Don, there used to be a distinction between what was called short-term capital gain and long-term capital gains.
Still is, yes, it's 1 year. Yes. Okay, it's 1 year.
Didn't it used to be like several years?
Not that I'm aware of. I was never that concerned about it until I reached retirement, and now I'll be watching all of that stuff.
Right. I mean, that's the one area where I think you could build a case to say we actually want our tax code to encourage people to invest. So we're going to do this long-term capital gains tax that'll be lower than the ordinary income tax or the other capital gains tax. But you have to hold that stock for a certain period of time. And I would think that probably something like 5 years would be better than just 1 year, because you can game the system with the 1 year kind of churn, as it were. I wouldn't fight hard against that. But as long as the capital gains tax is progressive, as long as the less you make, the more the less you pay in taxes.
And
it seems like a good thing
to me. To build a portfolio, to build an income portfolio is work. I would put it on your head saying, however much money you have, let's see you put them together in order to finance your retirement. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm having a ball doing it. But
Good.
That is work.
Good. No, I don't disagree. It is mental exercise, but it's not going to break your body. Like many jobs do over time. But I get your point.
Sitting at a desk will also hurt your butt or break your back.
You're absolutely right.
And that's
You're
what
absolutely
I'm doing as I'm studying.
Don, I got to run, but thank you for the call. We'll be right back. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. Hey, we have a new video over at ThomHartmann.com. It's about this movement that has, it's being characterized in the media as being just, fringe wackadoodles, crazy people on YouTube, stuff like that, who are talking about how Democrats are torturing children to get the adrenochrome out of them, and Hillary Clinton is eating babies, and the ship in the Suez Canal, and how, and the really interesting one now, how if you get the vaccine for COVID, that it will change your race. Yes, something that will make white people absolutely hysterical. The problem is, this isn't just the Flat Earth Society. These aren't the people that we used to laugh at. This isn't just a few crazies on the edge. They just had a convention in Oklahoma. A serious convention where they were calling for Democrats to be put in front of a firing squad and shot. You need to check this out. It's over at ThomHartmann.com. And welcome back. Carrie in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Hey, Carrie, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I think you're missing a big part of this.
Okay, what am I missing?
Not just the capital gains here, but there's been and you're right about the fact that the market did nothing for decades and then suddenly took off. But the growth in the GDP has gone 97% to the top 0.1%, right?
Right.
And how has that happened? The real growth in the gross domestic product has been shifted from wages to the stock market.
Excellent point.
It's gone to the people of the top.
Yeah, wages have been flat since Reagan came into power, and the market has exploded.
Well, Reagan created these deferred compensation arrangements where the CEOs would get warrants. So they shifted. When you see CEO compensation, like 90% of it are these warrants that have exploded in value. And this
which
is
are basically options to buy stock at an old price and then turn around and cash in at a new price. I don't know what a warrant is. I'm sorry. Is that what it is, a deferred stock option?
It's an option. Yes, exactly right. And so the value of the stock's going up and up and up and going to these executives. And this is what Reagan created with these deferred compensation arrangements. So it wasn't an accident that they were shifting this. Now, remember, the top tax bracket used to be 90%, but nobody paid 90%, right? Instead of that, right, they would invest in new labor, paying people more money. They buy capital expenditures to make their companies worth more money. That changed. All that changed. And so we have this tremendous concentration of wealth. It's a very complicated subject, but that's a big part of it. It's not just the capital gains tax, which is lower.
Yeah.
Because remember, Reagan made the capital gains tax the same as the top rate.
I think you're absolutely right, Kerry. And it is complex in that there's a lot of different moving pieces and a lot of different names. And then you got things like, the pass-through taxes and carried interest and all this other stuff. But the bottom line is that very wealthy interests in the United States have basically paid off politicians to rewrite the tax code to their benefit. And the Supreme Court made that legal in the 70s, in 76 and 78, and then doubled down on it in 2010 with Citizens United. And it's going to take another change in our tax code to get back to a fair tax code. And that's one of the things that President Biden is going to present tonight. And I am just waiting for the squealing and gnashing of teeth. I wanted to get this argument on the record today in advance. So, Kerry, thank you. It's great to hear from a tax professional. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Michelle in Van Nuys, California. Hey, Michelle, it says here you're a tax professional also. What's up?
I just wanted to clarify what that 2 callers ago was stating about people taking money out of their IRA account. Traditional IRAs are income that was tax deferred, that was never taxed except for Social Security and Medicare. So yes, of course, every single penny they withdraw is going to be taxable because it was never taxed. That's part of the whole thing of tax deferring the income. Whereas like a Roth IRA, if you put it in, you've already been taxed on it. It grows, and whatever you take out is not taxable when you take it out.
Well, that sounds like a pretty sweet deal.
Yeah, Roths are fairly recent. I mean, not so recent, but I would say somewhere in the 2000s or something like that is when they were first created. They didn't have them originally. And so you pay the money up front in a Roth, and then they're never taxable, and you don't have to take a mandatory distribution from them, whereas you do for a regular IRA. But the person who was saying that these retirees are having to pay income tax on the withdrawals, it's like, yes, that's not capital gains. That's income from deferred income.
Excellent point. Michelle, thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you. I appreciate the clarification. You are so right. It makes so much sense. Marco in Tacoma, Washington. Marco, we have a minute, a little less actually, to the end of the hour. What's up?
Oh, just real quick. If you meet somebody on the street who's a Tucker toady and he's harassing you about wearing masks, just start filming, call 911 yourself, tell them you think there's somebody here with a mental health issue. And not only that, but if he calls a 911 knowingly that it's not a real call, he can be charged, and you can file verbal assault charges against him. So you have some recourse.
Interesting. Yeah. Although, I just don't want to ever encourage anybody to dial 911 after what we've seen recently. But I totally get what you're saying, Marco. Thank you. Thank you very much for contributing to the conversation. Thank you all, in fact, for being with us today. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the program, for your thoughtful comments, for sharing the good word about the program with others, for going over to HartmannReport.com and signing up for my daily rant. Louise and I put a lot of work into those. I write them, she does the headlines and picks out the pictures and stuff, and we brainstorm them together every day on our walk. HartmannReport.com. Get out there, get active, tag You're It. Democracy requires all of us. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.
These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit delivery service. More information at HelloFresh.com, code TOM. CB Distillery for sleeping and pain relief. More info at CBDistillery.com, code TOM. Annie's Kit Clubs, creativity delivered right to your door. More info is available at annieskitclubs.com/Tom. EasyFlow, personal air filtration system. Fresh air anywhere. More info at easyflowusa.com, code TOM. Masterclass with world-class instructors. More info at masterclass.com/Hartman. And Dinovite, only the best all-natural pet supplements. More info at dinovite.com.
We say fight back!